The first thing I want to talk about a bit is, we were talking about being scared when we're young. And a lot of that when you're Christian, especially North American sects of Christianity. I'm Catholic. You two are different. You're mainline Presbyterian, Lauren, right? And you're evangelical, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Famously not now.
Famously not. Yes. My apologies. But when I was writing the book, there's the essay Devil's Nostril, which is about fear of hell, fear of Satan, and eventually fear of heaven. But for a long time, it was one of the first essays that I wrote. And for a long time, we were sort of debating whether or not to include it because, even for me, I was like, I don't know, is the devil scary to anybody but me? It seems like the devil's kind of lame. But nowadays, especially with like conspiracy theories and I guess, I don't know, should I even say QAnon?
No, don't. No. It's like Bloody Mary.
I'm just stuck on the lame thing. That was an intentional pun, right?
Oh, no. No, that was unintentional. Oops.
But, yeah, that's part of the lore of Satan, right? Or Old Scratch, that he has a limp.
Oh, I actually didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, when you meet Satan, if you want to meet Satan, put a cross under your left heel. Go and stand in a crossroads and deny Christ 3 times. Anyway. This is some of the lore that is out there about the devil.
That's great.
And yeah, well, so some of the lore also says that he walks with a limp.
Wait, so Chrissy,
he has a club foot.
How like real was the devil to you?
Pretty real. I was very afraid of the devil. I was very afraid of hell. I was definitely really, really scared as a kid of all these things. I also remember one time, like at a Christian summer camp, like talking to a counselor about being afraid of ghosts, and the counselor was like, "Well, of course, ghosts don't exist, but there are spirits." And then I was like, "Okay, dude, that's real helpful because, like, demons are way less scary than ghosts."
Oh, okay. Then I'm scared of spirits. Like what?
Yeah, but no, I spent like I don't even know how many nights as a fairly young kid, like praying the sinner's prayer over and over again, crying in bed, afraid that like it hadn't really taken and I was going to go to hell and suffer forever. Like it's a super scary concept. That eternal torture.
I was very scared of hell, but did not really ever believe in the devil. That wasn't something my church ever talked about. It was a mainline Presbyterian church which like, if you know the stereotypes about Presbyterians, they're very like buttoned up. This was in the suburbs of Berkeley, California, so
Frozen chosen.
We're wearing jeans and stuff, but it was talking about the devil would have been kind of melodramatic or gauche kind of, that was something that these like weird, snake handlers might do, not something we nice Presbyterians do. Not that, it wasn't that we ever talked about that Satan wasn't real. And I think probably most people did believe in Satan in some form, but like, I never really took it literally and was never scared of the devil. Very scared of hell, not so much of the devil.
I gotta say, the devil was kind of abstract to me as a kid. Like, I suppose I was afraid of the devil, but I was more afraid of the whole eternal torture thing. And so I definitely fixated on that. But I can really relate to Peter's writing about these themes, and I'm really glad that you did ultimately include this essay. And also, there's still, I think some good scary movies about the devil out there that aren't too terribly old, or like
The Witch. You mentioned The Witch, right?
And yeah, the Witch. Yeah.
And Devil's Advocate, obviously a little bit older, but it was a rather scary version of the devil, I thought. Yeah. Currently, I'm super enjoying Lucifer, which is a not scary version of the devil at all. But and I'm a fan of Hellboy and Dark Horse comics. I'm currently watching Umbrella Academy. Started the 2nd season. Anyway.
Peter, how literal was the devil to you growing up? Because obviously
Oh,
angels were very real to you and very vivid, like
yeah.
not just some kind of abstract thing. I mean, you were like, I need karate powers from angels, like, you know,
Yeah.
specific beings can do that. What about the devil?
I mean, it was kind of almost comically the exact shadow of God. So in the same way that I would pray to Saint Michael for these karate powers, but I wouldn't pray to God, because to me, at least in my Catholic experience, God was like way up above. I mean, that's why the cloud of unknowing spoke so much to me, is because I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, you're going to commune with the Godhead, you've got to forget everything. And so it's funny that you mentioned hell without Satan, because for me, the devil is in there, but he's sort of like the CEO of hell, and you don't really get to, you're like only dealing with the demons. So all of it was real to me.
I think that somehow that was kind of how I thought of the devil too. I mean, I guess I also thought that sometimes he walked among us and he tried to trick us and whatever. There's a great old song by, I think it's Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys. It's a 1940s song called "The Devil Ain't Lazy," talking about how he works 24 hours a day, and the devil's always trying to trick us and get us in trouble, make us sin. But I just couldn't imagine the devil in a very concrete way as a kid, and I couldn't imagine hell. And I wonder if this is kind of part of the whole, legacy of the Western imaginary of hell, which comes from Dante and gives us a really, really vivid and fascinating hell, but a really fucking boring devil. Sorry, am I allowed to say fucking on this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We are. We're like us.
This is promoting a book that contains some arguments in favor of cannibalism, so it's just all an explicit
Speaking
tag.
of cannibalism, I mean, how boring is it that Satan is just stuck at the bottom of hell and all he does is chew on the world's worst traitors?
Well, no,
constantly.
but I think so Dante is taking details of hell. I mean, he's creating some of them, but he's also taking some from previous apocryphal texts.
Oh, sure. But I'm just saying Dante is like a very important crystallization of the idea of hell.
But his devil, I think, is actually the most original part of it, because the devil is like, instead of being like a crafty little man, he's like weeping, right? So it's kind of a different take on Satan.
Oh, yeah, I know. But that's what makes him suck. And that's what makes him boring. He's original but boring.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the sorrow is an interesting thing, because obviously, I mean, that there are the two big poems that give us the modern context of the devil and Satan, and so we've also got Paradise Lost there. And so, one of the reasons why it's hard to imagine the devil as scary you doubt the fear of it, especially when you become an atheist or walk away from your faith. It's like, well, I don't know, isn't he sort of like my patron saint now? And so I do think it's interesting, we've got so many different things where everybody's like, well, devil's kind of the good guy now, right?
Yeah. Oh, I totally think that. I see the Promethean side. I mean, to me, Eve and the serpent are sort of the dual protagonists of the garden narrative. Adam's just a doofus and God is clearly the bad guy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking of God being the bad guy, I did also want to talk because, that essay does kind of pivot into, or I guess it kind of starts from this idea. It's not very long. This idea of, actually maybe heaven and God are more scary. And certainly, the person damning you to hell, the deity damning you to hell is God. And for you two, what was the experience of being God-fearing? Because I mean, I know I've read your own essays and listened to you both on many podcasts. I know that you were. I think we have a lot in common that way. Lauren, what was it like for you?
I think I experienced it less as fear and more as, less as terror and more as just a constant anxiety or dread. Something that I worried about more than feared and felt guilty about. My church, you know, was more on the liberal side-ish for American Christianity. And there was like a lot of kind of hemming and hawing about hell being not like a literal lake of fire, but it's the place where you're separated from God. So I didn't think of it as like being like literal pitchforks or whatever, but it was basically just like being scared of a big void of nothingness, which was also kind of what heaven was. So it was, yeah.
You know, yeah.
The nice, heaven is the nice void.
Right,
Yeah.
The nice oblivion.
A lot more than I desired to go to heaven, because heaven didn't seem like there was a whole lot. I mean, you know, theoretically it would be great, but I didn't have any imagination to like sink my teeth into on that.
Yeah.
But imagining the void is terrifying.
And Paradiso is really boring, let's be honest. So, you know, like heaven is a boring concept, which is a very blasphemous thing to think as a child. Now, as a small child, I hadn't read Dante, but again, I think we're dealing with this legacy. But in any case, I was, and that legacy is one of it, just kind of a vague, boring heaven where people praise God forever. I mean, you know, I believed in literal mansions and streets of gold and whatever, and we didn't have all those like tears that Dante you know, had with the great chain of being thing, and just how good you were is like, you know, what spot you get in heaven. Like, you know, we didn't really believe in that stuff. But when I stopped to think about it, I mean, I sometimes would speculate with my parents or other people around about like what heaven would be like and what we could do there. And like, would we be able to like just explore things we couldn't have time to do on Earth? But, you know, sometimes I was very just troubled by the idea that this is just worshiping God forever, which sounds incredibly dull. Like, how is that supposed to make you happy? And sometimes I would imagine like people like being put in these like sort of like cloud stasis machines, and like maybe like occasionally come out, but mostly just like kept in stasis. And I don't know, I just couldn't imagine it in a way that made it appealing.
Yeah, I mean, other than the absence of torture, I mean, but
Right.
you know,
Just
like
big incentive, but
exactly. But you know, and then there's always like the jokes, like, well, all of our favorite rock stars and celebrities are all in hell anyway. So you know, if you can be tortured near Bowie, why not?
Heaven for the climate, hell for the company. Yeah.
Exactly. That sort of brings me to think about how my religious belief really made me have a fearful attitude toward anything supernatural. And I'm wondering if you two had any experiences, you know, with like as you mentioned before, like spirits or ghosts, you know, things like that. Like, did you also believe that, or how did that affect how you feel about supernatural horror?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was very, very afraid of demonic activity, and was encouraged to be afraid of demonic activity, and even had a pastor when I was in high school, about 16 years old, who was very into the spiritual warfare and demon stuff. And his father had written a book about spiritual warfare and getting free from demonic bondage. And so I was also having doubts. I had like read through the entire Bible for myself for the first time and could not resolve all these contradictions. And so I would talk to him about it. Now, he believes he actually saw a demon physically appear as a kid. He totally believes that really happened to him. My dad also tells stories about sort of like seeing like flashes that in college he interpreted as demons and angels or whatever, that he really experienced this intense kind of spiritual warfare. I didn't have any of those experiences of seeing anything myself, but I was very afraid of it. And I mean, we were taught that the devil was like this real, you know, person-like being. He was the only being that not only were you allowed to hate, but you were supposed to hate. At the same time, in my family, we could celebrate Halloween just like in a very mild way. My mom would not let us say trick or treat as little kids. She would not let us watch Bewitched or He-Man or, you know, any number of these things that were like supposed to be demonic. But some things that did make the cut are just very arbitrary in retrospect. Like I Dream of Jeannie and the Smurfs, which was banned in a lot of fundamentalist households because of Gargamel and sorcery and all of that, right?
Right.
And also, or because it's communist propaganda, according to certain conspiracy theorists.
Well, that's just, I mean, just look at it.
The sorcery, that's above board, but communism.
This pastor guy, well, see, but he wants to turn Smurfs into gold, right? So that's capitalism as being portrayed as the bad guy. But anyway, so yeah, this pastor told me that, well, the first time I went to him with doubts, he gave me an apologetics book. It was in question and answer format. I don't remember what the book was, not one of the big famous ones, not like Josh McDowell, you know, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. So I read it, but I found the answers too glib and unsatisfying. So I went back and said my doubts were unresolved. And then suddenly the problem was with me. So I must be harboring sin in my life, he said. I had opened myself up to demonic influence. Now, he didn't really believe in like possession, but he believed that people could be demonized. And so he quasi-exorcised me in just that, you know, very Protestant, very arrogant way of just like praying against the demons, which like commanding them to leave in Jesus' name, which is also what his family spent Halloween doing. They just stayed inside and prayed against the demons.
Like they performed little family exorcisms. That's
sort of.
Honestly, that sounds like a pretty
I mean, they were, well, no, it would have been super boring.
Yeah.
Because they were just praying. They were just praying
Just
to limit all the demonic activity happening all around on Halloween, right? Like,
right.
I really think it would have been super boring.
Right.
We were at least allowed to wear costumes and do some trick-or-treating, but we had to say Happy Halloween instead of trick-or-treat.
Oh.
So it was really lame. And we could not wear scary costumes. I mean, when I was a little bit older, then I was allowed to experiment, and I was a werewolf one year, because that's the kind of stuff that I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was a little kid, it had to be things like a clown and a rabbit. But anyway, yeah, so I was then very, very scared that I was influenced by demons, and I smashed an Our Lady Peace CD because I thought maybe it was a channel of demonic influence. I smashed some beautiful replicas of Japanese opera masks that my grandma had sent me.
Oh, wow. Yikes. Yeah. I mean, that does, you know, that does show how much this does get into you. Lauren.
Yeah. And I just want to say quickly too, just one other thought on like, you know, horror for people who live this kind of conservative Christianity. In my experience, it seems like people either like really embrace it all of a sudden, or they're still afraid of it because of just, it's a lingering trauma trigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's very, very fair, especially when it comes to like Christian horror, with exorcisms and stuff like that.
Yeah, Christian-related horror, like, you know, Damien or whatever. But it all scared me, like including The Ring, which I'm still kind of sorry I watched, but... You know.
Oh, yeah. Videotape horror. I mean, we don't have to worry about that anymore. Like, people don't... Samara didn't figure that one out. She was like,
People's spirits cannot be transmitted by streaming, so...
No, exactly.
Are you sure?
I think it does in one of the sequels, but in the novels, it's very much, it starts on the tape and ends on the tape. Though, I mean, pioneer of the viral video, if I may. But Lauren, how did your faith affect your fears of the supernatural?
Never really thought about the supernatural, you know, past a young, you know, when I was like little, I was afraid of ghosts or whatever, but and monsters, whatever, but never really thought about it past that age, and religion really had no effect on it one way or the other, I don't think.
Oh, well, that's...
I do think like I do think I now say like I don't believe in anything supernatural, and that like includes religion. I think that maybe makes me like more, like leaving religion has maybe made me more sure that I don't really believe in ghosts or anything, but it's not like I ever experienced anything that couldn't be explained or felt depressed. I never had any experience like that at all.
Do you have any stories about being scared in a particularly Christian way?
I will say like I said earlier, I really experienced it more as like dread rather than like terror. But as I read your book, I thought about the show Black Mirror. And there's a bunch of episodes where there's like a concept that like consciousness, a human consciousness can be like digitized and then trapped forever and theoretically tortured, right? So they'll trap someone's consciousness and then they can like fast forward time so that they just experience 200 years of loneliness, but you only experience 30 seconds, and then they'll do whatever you want, stuff like that. And to me, when I watch it, I always just think, yeah, like I already spent my entire childhood worrying about hell. This is like, you're just recreating hell. You clearly weren't raised Christian, and now you need to figure out what you think about hell. I got over that fear a long time ago, and this isn't scary to me anymore. Yeah. So like, I guess just like that was the fear that I had for so long, of eternal torture, and I don't fear it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. I was definitely afraid of eternal torture. And one thing I should say about that pastor, though, is that he was also the person who introduced me to the idea that hell could just be annihilation of the soul, though he wasn't convinced of that one way or the other, I don't think. So obviously, like take the less risk option, or just be, you just still don't want to go there in case it is you burn forever. But yeah.
I mean, as an atheist, I believe in annihilation, right? Like that's
it's funny when people are like, well, what if there's nothing afterward? I'm like, well, honestly, I'm so tired right now. Please.
Yeah, no, life is pretty horrifying. But yeah, I was also then, afraid of demonic influence and that sort of thing. And, Christianity teaches you, or conservative Christianity, authoritarian Christianity teaches you to doubt your own doubts and to gaslight yourself so that, when you have doubts, they come from the devil, right? It's one of these disciplinary mechanisms that you internalize that helps keep you in the fold. So there were some very strong fears associated with that, fears of questioning, fears of leaving, and if you do, what if you're wrong? And there's a great lyric from a Death Cab for Cutie song, I Will Follow You Into the Dark, that says, I held my tongue as she told me, son, fear is the heart of love, so I never went back. And I really identify with those lyrics now, those couple of lines there, because I was basically taught, that fear is the heart of love. No one ever phrased it that way, but in Christian school, that's certainly what I was taught, that love is associated with fear, that our own bodies and our own sexuality and our own minds are some of the most significant things we should be afraid of. And we would externalize that to some degree, to be afraid of demonic influence, spiritual warfare, demonic temptation, and that sort of thing. But, really, conservative Christians are very paranoid people who are deathly afraid of themselves and of experiencing life, which kind of makes them the ultimate nihilists who are so afraid of nihilism that they project this whole, other reality on it.
Mm-hmm. That's a powerful note to end on. Fear of oneself.
I learned something today.
The ultimate, the deepest, darkest abyss is the one within the cavity where our souls once lay.
Yeah, and I do think Freud got one thing right. These fuckers are afraid to grow up. They never grow up and face their fears. And that's why they're terrible and they're, ruining our country with their Trump support.
Those words as true as when Freud wrote them. Those fuckers are afraid to grow up.
Freud wasn't always just such a proper Viennese psychologist.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that this is also a little bit in the book, but people who express authority are the most scared of all, and the real way out of any of these terrible situations is to sort of Sisyphus it, just accept it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that's Sisyphus inflected through Camus.
Yes. Yeah. Pardon me.
yeah, so our first anthology, Empty the Pews, Stories of Leaving the Church, which has a brilliant essay from Peter in it, was focused a lot on evangelicals, former evangelicals, as well as some former Catholics and Mormons, and then me as a random Presbyterian in there. The new one we are taking submissions for right now, tentatively titled Empty the Pews 2. Is focusing.
We're going to come up with a better title.
I mean, it's a classic sequel.
Empty the Pews, into the empty-verse.
It's focusing more on like more hardline and more marginalized religions. So like ex-Amish people who were raised ultra-conservative or ultra-Orthodox Jewish rather, like FLDS.
We'd like to expand the conversation beyond even sort of like mainstream conservative Christianity and also beyond Christianity. So we'd like to get some ex-Muslim narratives in there if people submit them. That's not to say that we won't take, more extreme fundamentalist forms of ex-evangelical or ex-Catholic stories, or even some that might not be that extreme, but just we'll have to see how the volume comes together and how we end up curating it. But it's meant to be an expanded conversation on the horrors of fundamentalism, and one where we might focus less directly on sort of issues of like electoral politics that are very obviously surface level, but get more into the psychological level of the damage that fundamentalism does to you in the ways that American conceptions of religious freedom and total lack of a formalized conception of children's rights leads to people being deprived of a proper education and of being prepared for life outside the religious community and that sort of thing.
Okay, well, I will include the link to the submission information in the video description, or if I'm really clever with video editing, like here, whatever those YouTubers do, they do.
Yeah, I have no idea how they do that. But.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all like geriatric.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm 40 years old over here. I don't YouTube.
As a millennial, I never thought the day would come where I'm like, I don't know about computers, but here I am.